We'll avoid him though. He'll throw it at you.
You know what? Eric and Mike, they got off of Canisius campaign.
Why?
Heard he was
Here we go again.
Can you eat pie with chopsticks? Really?
We'll find out. One bamboo, one plastic. It's always great to like bring food together and just kind of hang out with the guys and. Let's see. We go this way.
Yeah, go back there.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, get this way! Hi, Steve.
Uh-huh.
That's what Shirley's been asking. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be good to get like
Play really well.
do like some
what are you
temps
telling
or
him?
something like
I
that.
don't know, he plays pretty well. I had a good time at the dinner. I think one of the things was a chance to really talk to the guys more on things we never talk about.
I don't know if there will ever be a time where I feel comfortable talking about it.
And it changes people's lives. Changed my life.
I mean, it's not okay anymore. It doesn't work anymore.
It never has.
You know,
It's like for me, denial's not an option anymore.
Some of these men are my best friends. And I've known them for years. And I still heard some things that were new to me. What would I want white people to know or to hear?
So what I want to say to a white person,
If I was facing a white person,
first thing that came to mind was "fuck you."
I think that's part of one of the problems of racism and the ignorant stuff is when people just don't understand it or they close their minds to it. They don't want to understand you.
I would want white people to unconditionally accept whatever I say my experience with racism is, or whatever experience we as Asian Americans say our experience is.
I want you just to listen to me. I want you to hear my story.
In the Asian community, you do try to control yourself. You know, you have this face that you have to like keep up and you know, also not try to rock the boat and be a model citizen, or you know, just go straight ahead.
Maybe for all of us that we're saying, at least for myself, I hear this kind of tape playing that sounds a lot like what you're saying, which is that,
right?
my folks just used to say, that's not your battle. You're better than that, and you just have to kind of, you know, endure. You know, like,
right?
Come on, right?
Yeah,
Come
well, that's
on,
the Japanese
right.
thing. I mean, the first people coming over here, the oppression about language is used a lot to keep people down, right? And I think it's still there. It's still playing. It's playing in a different way now because it's generations there, you know, removed, but it's still playing there to kind of oppress us.
I mean, that's how ingrained it was. Degrading. I mean, to tell someone that the name your father gave you, how beautiful it was. And you come over here and they tell you they can't pronounce it, so then it's not beautiful. Almost immediately, there's something disgraceful about you. And so and we're taught in the Chinese culture to respect authority. So, I mean, what do? I mean, first thing we do is we say, okay, they must know what they're saying.
Oh, well, but geez, my sense though is that a lot of our grandparents or great grandparents or even our parents did that so they wouldn't die. I mean,
Out
could
of
you imagine?
necessity, yeah.
Oh yeah, you know, could you imagine kind of bucking the trend of saying,
system,
oh,
yeah.
like,
Right.
no, I'm not Gary, I'm Manoir, and getting killed for it. I mean, back in like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
You know how I sometimes say about being Asian American? One of my favorite ways to describe it, it's a blessing and it's a curse.
I was really reflecting on Joe's story. I think the way I've always done it in the past has been this overachiever thing, right? You know, I guess my folks used to always say, if you're that much good, they couldn't say anything that would really bother you. I mean, if you were just, if you made more money, you got better grades, it wouldn't matter what they said, right?
Bullshit. So myself and the other people who came to this school with me from where we were originally from, we wound up sort of like in this one area. And you could always tell that there were these comments going on with the rest of the class or among certain people in the class. You weren't quite sure what it was all about, but you knew just by the way they looked at you and they were gesturing at you, they were talking about you, you know? And you were always trying to get a handle on why it was that way and why it was you and no one else.
Hmm.
And I knew right away that it was because I was this person of color from this predominantly community of color.
A lot of my friends used to make jokes and call me chink and stuff, and then kind of go, oh yeah, ha ha, you know. You kind of just take it in and you go, I screwed you over in grades, didn't I?
One of my personal responses was to try and beat them at their own game.
Yeah.
So I was the consummate overachiever, you know, and I got into positions that other people didn't get into, and I did that, and that was my way of saying, hey, fuck you, I can do this, and I can be here, and I can have a position of power.
The lesson is supposed to be, yeah, you know, that you just ground them into the dirt and you got the respect because you got really good grades or, you know, you tried really hard and stuff, and then you kind of go, geez, that was hardly a trade-off. That wasn't much of a trade-off.
Won't they just call you a chink and get straight A's?
And when you're this one Filipino or 2 or 3 Filipinos in this school, it's mostly white, how are you going to how are you going to put together a personal response, let alone a collective response that is really this collective, this small collective, and this huge sea of people who feel the same way about, you know, routinely slandering you as a flip from Montgomery, right?
Yeah.
And that was like this really frustrating experience. And what happened was the visual and the visible results of that was that some of the people I wound up going to that school with decided to go back. They couldn't handle it. I mean, that was like a tangible result of their that brand of racism. It just drove people away from these opportunities.
You think about moving to Japan or something like that, or you think about moving to some place where everyone's Asian, Hawaii. But this is where I live, you know, and this is what I face, and this is what I've always faced.
We're at a bar, and this guy asked me, well, so what are you, right? And you know, and I said, well, and then my first immediate thought process is in the past I'm used to just saying, oh, I'm Japanese, right? And that just kind of answers the question because you know what they're trying to ask.
You have to decide, right?
You have to decide.
Yeah, it's like a guy in Chevys. Do I have to do?
Do
I
you
have
say
time?
you're Japanese? Or I mean, even that's a minor thing too. People expect you just to say one thing. Actually, it is true.
What
when
nationality are
you
you?
start adding American into it, people come up with all kinds of weirdness. My response then was, well, I'm Japanese American. And his response was, yeah, I thought there was a bit of Italian in you or something like that. So that, I mean, that's saying then, oh, then part of me is white, so I must be hapa or half, right? Instead of just full-blooded Japanese American.
Well, I hate that they even ask you, what are you?
Well,
Yeah, what are you? Exactly.
I'm a human being.
I'm an architect. We're especially, you know,
Then they laugh and say, well, you know what I mean. Where are you from? I'm from Oakland. No, where are you really from?
Yeah, what's your nationality? What's your nationality?
What are your parents? Where do they come from?
You know, if you're hop or whatever,
Yeah,
it's
really.
like, so what does that make you?
yeah,
You
just say,
know, you want
as
me
soon,
to-
why don't you tell me what you are first?
Or do you know? And it's this whole thing about, you know, you are not American unless you're white. And actually, I think even to be American is black, I think is probably accepted now. But if you're Asian or Latino or anything else, any other ethnicity, then you're not American, right? You're still essentially tied to the immigration of when you came over.
And the images and the ignorance is constantly there, and it's put forth to you all the time. And sometimes it's not always direct. Sometimes it's not always in terms of a one-on-one confrontation or a one-on-one experience, but it's in the media. It's in all the messages that the society puts out, and it's like you can't get away from it, right?
Well, I was born in Stockton, California, and that's a ripoff being born there and being a minority. It's like being ripped off, you know? It's like you're being kicked every day. I mean, this happened a long time ago, but I could still see this. We're in my family's car. It's this huge station wagon, right? My mom is driving. My older sister's sitting in front. I'm sitting in back. My other sister's sitting right next to me. In front of us is this carload of white, very white, white family. Kids, white kids, younger than us, in the back. and they're, you know, playing in the back, and they're in front of us, and we're getting on the freeway, and they turn around to us, and they all start going like this. And we're all sitting in the car, and I could just feel everyone just freeze and get really rigid. And nothing was said, and nothing was said. And I remember we got on the freeway, and my mom, like, floored it, man. She, like, jamming past these kids, and nothing was said at all. And I remember one day looking in the mirror going, fuck, I hate being Japanese. I hate it. And it wasn't so much I wanted to be white or something else. I just wanted to be something different, you know. You know, it's one of those things where we all knew that we were all pissed off. I mean, you know, we're probably like grabbed in a car seat like this or something, you know. I mean, it was just in the air. I think the level of intensity in the car just went, you know, shot through the ceiling.
The biggest thing I lost from racism was a sense of culture. I think as I grew up, I realized, or I guess it became clear to me that to be able to fit in meant losing a lot of the parts of culture that my parents were telling me to keep. I was eating dinner with my dad's aunt who worked for the immigration service. It was one of these family dinners, and so I'm there, mostly Chinese people, and she invites some of her white friends from work. And this white woman is just sitting next to me, you know, and she knows I'm a first-year law student. And all this, I tell her all this stuff. She says, we're eating dinner, and then we're just eating dinner like we always eat dinner. And she goes, you know, this is such a weird thing because, you know, my mom used to say that Chinese people ate in such a strange way. They eat like dogs. And then I just found out that's just the custom. That's just the way people eat. I kind of going, holy shit. So I'm sitting at this table with my aunt, right? And am I supposed to fire on this woman? So I just ate it. I mean, I just ate it. And it was not only convenient, but it was also easy to lose it. And going into high school, I was in basically an all-white high school. It was really easy to try to fit in if you dropped all the rest of the stuff and looked like everybody else. And it was only when I got to work in the community that I realized that I had actually lost it. But I couldn't figure out why. I just thought it was me. I thought it was just being lazy or the fact that I just hadn't thought about it enough. It's only recently I've kind of learned that racism has something to do with it. That racism made it that much more expedient, but also easy to kind of throw off all the trappings of culture. One of the things I used to always lament about when I first worked in the communities is that I couldn't speak Cantonese. I still can't. And I say to this day, God, I wish my parents would have made me go to Chinese school so I could use that. And yet, that's a total fantasy because I would have never gone to Chinese school and I would have fought it the entire time. And I probably wouldn't have learned anything anyway because it just wasn't something that I thought I needed. And it made it that much easier to blend into like a white high school and white friends not being Asian.
I think it would have helped as kids growing up. I think it would have helped if they would have explained what racism was. You know, so you don't feel like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why are these kids like calling me names? What's wrong, you know? What did I do wrong? What is wrong with me? And really what I needed to hear was, there's nothing wrong with you. In fact, there's something you should be really proud of. And you know what? I didn't get that feeling. I didn't get that feeling about being really proud and really understanding the enormity and the lineage that I have until I went to Japan.
Recently, I had a Caucasian man tell me that I don't see you as an Asian person. I just see you as a human being. And he thought that he was complimenting me. He thought that that would make me feel really good. And for a while, I couldn't figure out why I was so uneasy with someone saying that to me. I mean, obviously, my God, it must feel good that someone sees you as a human being. And then I thought about it for a while and I realized, but I am a human being. I am a human person. What I don't see from you, what I don't hear from you, is that you feel good about me being an Asian man. You see, I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of my difference in being an Asian man. I feel good about that. I love who I am.
And I hear about these people. You know, having surgery so they don't look Asian. And there's people running around going, God, that's really sick, you know, but I understand. I understand, because it's a hard thing. It's really hard.
Like
For
which
me,
ones?
racism is layered also with homophobia,
Yeah.
right? So I get
No,
all
that's
this
right.
practice, right? Because homophobia in the gay community, I mean, racism in the gay community is like better than alive and well. It's like thriving in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's in the city, and you see it all over the place. And I join with other people in a collective response to racism in the gay community. And so I get practice and empowerment through that way as well.
So you get double practice.
Yeah, I get extra practice. We've been bombarded with these images of what's normal, what's right in this society, what's acceptable. And that those images and that bombardment hasn't been anything about being Filipino. It hasn't been anything about being Asian. It hasn't been anything about being gay. It's been none of those things. It's about being American. It's about being white. It's about being a person who doesn't rock the boat, who just takes all this stuff when you're a person of color.
And then so she asked me about being in law school, and then I said, well, you know, I'd really like to practice Asian. Oh, do Asian people have problems? You know, it's like one of those, oh God, what do I do now, you know? And so, you know, I unloaded this really academic treatise on the problems that Asians have with culture and language and lack of access to institutions and the need for lawyers and all that stuff. And all that kind of saying, fuck you. Shit, why am I doing this? Fuck you, you know? Have I ever wanted to fire on it? Sure, I just want to fire on. But I hardly ever fire on anyone like that.
For me, to be able to get to that point where I'll be able to talk to a white person about racism and how it affects me, there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you have to accept and drop into.
Just as scary, or in a different way scary, is not just to talk to someone who's an acquaintance, but talk to someone who's a friend. Have you guys ever talked to a white friend who wasn't quite in sync with how you're thinking about this stuff? I mean, that's really hard, because you have to figure out, okay, I'm going to take the risk. Is this friendship going to blow up in my face right now if I could say, I think you're not seeing this the right way?
Well, I was thinking that the hardest part about confronting racism with people who are closest to you is the risk. The risk that it might damage the friendship. They might not be there for you the next time. But I think that there's probably a more deeper risk, and that is that they might not understand. I think that sometimes I avoid asking that question or confronting people because I don't want to know that. That somehow if I know that, I don't know if how it's going to affect me, how I feel about them anymore.
It's not something that instinctually, or comfortably, I know how to deal with. When all these feelings come up, you feel hurt, you feel really afraid, like your life is in danger sometimes.
I don't feel like I'm free to go out and date white women for a variety of reasons, but I think that the key racial thing about it is that I feel like I'm going to get the shit beat out of me if I walk down the street. I'm going to go into a bar and people are going to look at me and saying, what the hell is this gook doing with one of our women, right?
You could turn the corner, you could be beat up, or you could be killed simply for how you look. And it would have nothing to do with the fact that whether you've experienced racism before. Just for the fact that the way you look, you belong to the Asian community, you can be a victim of racism that quickly. I think people need to know that. I mean, that's something that is a loss. I mean, it's a loss of security that you have nothing. You could be as rich as you want, you could be as tall as you want, you could be as good looking as you want, and you could still be a victim of racist violence just because you're Asian. I mean, and no other reason.
My parents did tell me that they suspected racism had a lot to do with their lives. I mean, they told me about how they couldn't buy houses in certain areas. The reason why the reason why my family lived in Monterey Park in the Los Angeles area was because they knew that Chinese could buy houses there. They told me about that stuff.
In their lifetime, they've gone through probably 10 times worse racism, 1,000 times worse racism than me. I mean, they're in camps.
The fact that when they came out of camp, they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't live in certain areas because they're Japs. The fact that people coming out of camps, that's why, and people ended up cleaning houses and doing laundry and doing gardening, because that's the only jobs they could get. So then, therefore, you had the stereotype about, well, then all Japanese are house cleaners or gardeners.
I go, why would my parents put up with shit like this? And then you kind of go, well, God, a generation ago, they could have been killed for this.
And I think, depending on what the action is, what the racist action is, the reverberations and the ripple, it can go generations.
You believe that your parents are always going to protect you and take care of you. And then when you have your parents, especially your father, when your father goes out into the world and he's afraid of whites. Right. And then he tells you all the time to be brave and strong. I mean, it scares you about the world.
They told me when they suspected that my father wasn't getting as far as he wanted to in the corporate world because it might be because of racism, because he's Chinese. My dad kind of came to a point where he couldn't get to where he wanted to get to, and he wasn't sure it was because of he was Chinese, but he wasn't sure it wasn't. Yeah. And so they'd talk about that, every so often, and it's like, well, I think it's, it might be because of this. They're not sure, and even that kind of uncertainty is really kind of damaging. Yeah. You like to be able to say, well, the guy's just racist. He won't promote it because I'm Chinese, even though he tells me I'm doing a great job. But he couldn't say that, and he thinks he's doing a great job. He's being told he's doing a great job. So what's going on? Even that uncertainty is kind of it eats at you, I think. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that we'd like to protect our children, but I also felt like I wish I could have done something for him too. I wish I could have helped him. And I know it really affected how I saw my dad too, because by the time I was a teenager and he was going through this stuff, he looked, I'd say he looked kind of beaten. Tired. Yeah, tired. No, but kind of beaten, like he lost.
Your father, your mother, but especially your father, since he's passed away. If he was here, what would you say to him?
Well, I would tell him that even though I'm crying right now, that I want him to know that I have a very strong resolve that even though I know this exists, that racism is there, it's in my life, for me and my family, all of us Asians in America, and though I know it hurts, and it's going to continue to hurt, that it's not going to beat us. It's not going to get the best of me. I'm going to continue to fight. And I really believe that we're going to overcome it, bust through it. And I'm going to fight really hard. Not just for me, but for him too.
I think it was really hard for him to verbalize everything that happened to him through that incident. But he knew something bad was happening. I mean, it was like racism without a name. I mean, he knew that he was being disgraced or he was being treated differently. And I'm not sure, if he has a real sense of that loss.
And I've been wanting to unlearn racism for my whole life. And I probably will spend my whole life doing it. It's so ingrained, it's so degrading, it's so insulting. And I don't want my son to grow up like that. I'm tired of being a survivor. I deserve more than that.
There was this time they were on the playground and they were singing this. They were singing this song that had something to do with Chinese and Japanese, and all the white kids were singing. And then Gary was singing it too, and then he sings it at home, and then his mom just goes crazy. She goes, "Oh, where'd you learn that?" And he goes, "We learned it on the playground." He goes, "Well, who taught it to you?" It's the other kids. And then he goes, "Is there something wrong about it?" And then she explained to him, and then his face just changes because he knows that he was singing a song about himself. And then the solution was that his mom calls the teacher, and the teacher talks to the rest of the class, and then they basically explain this whole thing about the song, etc. One thing that I never quite got a sense of is whether Gary got back something or kind of figured out where he fit back into this thing. I mean, they stopped doing it and stuff, right? And in a sense, the initial irritant goes away, but then I'm not quite sure what that did to him either.
A nephew that I have, he's actually half Filipino, half Chinese American. Okay, but I was talking to him, right, and we were talking about people that we knew, and he said, "Well, who's your grandmother?" He said, "Oh, she's Chinese, and who's your father's, and he's Filipino, and all that kind of stuff, right?" And there's a friend of ours that's Caucasian, right, and who's he? Oh, he's American.
It's not so much that I want them to be able to beat up anybody whenever they get called a name, or I always wonder about when they're confronted by one time they were driving down the street with their mom and some guy just leans out his car and starts screaming "you chink" to them and swearing at him for no reason. I mean, so that Dennis is sitting there, he's probably about 8. He doesn't get it, right? Doesn't get it. I mean, and so the thing I would want to take out of their lives is that uncertainty, kind of well, gee, I don't know why it is. So maybe it isn't going to be that they can get out of the car and bash the guy's windows in or something, right? But at least that uncertainty that would not, gee, is it me? Is it the way I'm dressed? Is it because I'm a bad person, or is it because I'd want them to know there is racism. It's because they look the way they look. There isn't always going to be a solution for it, and they're going to have to find a solution. But they need to know that that's there. I mean, so when people say stuff to them on the playground, it isn't they'll say something to a white kid and say "you stink," and then they'll say "you Chinaman," and they've got to know that's different. I mean, that's different, and they're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it, but it's different. And what I want them to remember is that they are different, and there's something very different about them that will be different from now until they die. And they're Asian, they're not white, they're not the majority population in this country. And because of that, mean-spirited people, institutions, and even the government will treat them different. What they have to do, they have to know when that happens, they have to be angry about it, and they have to do whatever they can to change that.
What gets to me was like when like the white folks do say, I don't see you as a person of color, right? To me, what pisses me off is the fact that, well, at least you have the option of not having to face that. See, I feel like the options that I have is either to face up to it and get like burnt out or like be hypersensitive to it or something, whatever, or to deny it, which is kind of very unsatisfying too. But I don't have the option of not having to have to face it. It's like society says I don't have a right to that feeling of anger about it because I don't know, that there's stuff out there that diffuses it.
This rage, you know, it's this rage that is there, and when people talk about, you know, physical violence against racism, it taps into that and it like satisfies that somehow. There, you know, it just feels like there's this ocean of rage.
We always talk about racism against white people. I mean, it definitely occurs between communities and such. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking about, I don't think that there's anything that I know of that I can call a white person that's quite as hurtful as, like, if a black person called me something, I'd call them afterwards, and I know that hurts. They call me a Jap or a chink, I know that hurts. I don't know what to call a white person. You know, I mean, to me, whitey or, you know, honky, that, I don't know. But it's like, so the next level for me as a male, well, then it gets physical, right? And that's the next level, right? But then there's just nothing satisfying about that, right?
I actually think now the way I'm dealing with it is more healthy. You know, it's coming out and it's confronting people and saying, you know, that's racist, that's wrong. Mm-hmm. But it is tiring.
Yeah. Frankly speaking, I guess I kind of resent this whole thing that we have to go through life teaching people that racism against Asian Americans is bad on a personal level. I mean, I guess taking John's analogy, I would rather take the biggest stick possible and just smash something, right? You know, I guess that's maybe the approach that that I've had, like in the last part of my work life. I mean, we're looking for bigger and bigger political vehicles to do one thing really big to kind of smash as much of it as we can at one time. I know in my heart that you have to kind of deal with people.
Right.
I just think that's really frustrating, and frankly, I don't know why we have to do it.
I don't know if I want someone to know this kind of hurt unless I know that it's going to come coupled with or come in tandem with an education.
I want you to acknowledge that something happened to me that was wrong.
And because you just see me as whatever, a person of color, a flip, a chink, a Jap, that doesn't give you license to put me down or to hurt me. Your ignorance doesn't give you license to do anything like that. So, don't do it. And we can work on figuring out reasons why you shouldn't. But don't do it.
Other thing I would want is I want to know they want to help. They want to help in fighting racism too. And they would want it to both know my story, my experience, and also want to find out what they could do to help me through that.
I want you to take some responsibility that you too, as a white person, need to stand with other people of color.
Helping me or helping other people is not just going and doing that. You have to understand the person or the community you're in. You have to understand what their issues are, and you have to change. You have to take responsibility to change who you are and to understand that your role is different.
And then I think I was also struck by the simplicity. Sometimes when someone like Joe would just say, just don't do it. I mean, how many different hundreds of ways we complicate that phrase. and yet really deep down is, I just want you to stop doing this. I want you to stop hurting me.
So I have my camera on, right? And Louis and I we're standing over in the snow and having our picture taken. And I have my camera on my neck, and the guy who took the picture said, hey, take off that camera. Your eyes aren't slanted enough.
Ooh.
And I said, Dave,
Japanese
that's
tourists.
racist. Cut it out. And he took the picture, and then I basically went up to him and I said, Dave, you know, that's completely racist. That's an insult, not, you know, to me, but to all people of color. And I mean, that was as far as it went, and we'd all decided to go our separate ways, and there was a lot of tension there. But it was good. I'm glad there was that tension there because people really understood how it affected me. And people, that's part of this whole thing about not letting it slide anymore, is that you just, people are going to have this thing, right? I mean, these white people that I've hung out with before, they know me. They know that I'm going to call them on this kind of stuff. Like, I went to one of these parties, and somebody said Janet Jackson was music. And I just blew up. I said, who said that? Did Dave say that? You know, this guy Dave, man. You know, it's just, come on. But you know what, though? But see, the thing is, though...
Where does Dave get that?
Yeah, where does Dave get that? Right. But see, the thing is, though, that people know that. People know that that's where I'm coming from. And people know that that's me. And you know what? I mean, they're watching out. They're watching out because they know I'm going to say something. Or I'm going
That's
to call
good.
them on that.
That's really good.
And that kind of tension is like, it's a good thing.
Asian people historically haven't said anything.
Right.
And so white people, you know, have gotten away with being more racist maybe around Asians or something like that. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
So I think now this tension that you're talking about is gonna build. I think there's gonna be a lot of tension when we start. We are more vocal about it. We are calling people on it. You know, it's white people, black people, all people.
It takes a lot of courage. I mean, we could say that. Oh, I wish all the Asian people would speak up, but it takes a lot of courage. I remember the first time I did what you did. Boy, my voice was just shaking. I mean, I could, my legs were like water. But darn, you know, the second time, I got a lot better with it. You know, and it's been years now. But at least I stopped putting it in my head, and I started saying it, and that really made a difference. But I really commend your courage each time.
I guess there would be two things that I want, though. I guess I would want white people to unconditionally accept whatever I say my experience with racism is, or whatever experience we as Asian Americans say our experience is, because irrespective of how much they know about the experience of Asian Americans, they've never been Asian American. So I think they should accept that straight out. I guess the other thing is, if I was in front of an audience, I would say tomorrow morning, the first thing you wake up, I want you to think how your life is changed by racism, or how your life is affected by racism. I think hard about it and come up with the very tangible things or the intangible things, and just think about it, because that's what basically people think about all the time. When we're Asians, African Americans, Latinos, we live racism every day, and white people, believe it or not, live racism every day, and I think they need to know that. I mean, it's not something that we own.
And so you pick your struggles. You decide if there's something really at stake, you know, and you pursue it. But you don't let it slide. You don't let it slide. I'm not 100%, I think, on the don't let it slide stuff. I mean, it's not like I'm, you know, like completely pure and it like happens and I'm, hey. But for the most part, yeah, don't be afraid to be heavy and don't let it slide.
Le Manoir is here with us today, and in a moment we're going to see a clip or two from The Color of Fear, and then all of us are going to go through his workshop and hope that you at home will join with us.
You give us a hard time for being white, being American, and being in control.
For a white person to look at me and say, "You're just like me, we're both American," totally insults me.
Because you're not allowed to be a black man in corporate America. Walk through some halls with some pride, you're gonna scare some people. Show that you have some intelligence, you scare people.
So you're right.
You gotta shuffle.
When my father hit Texas, he never stopped. He went straight through Texas.
The fear is still there because I know it can happen. Because it has happened, not to me, but to people who look just like me.
To me, when I hear it from a white person, it means, why can't we all just pretend to be white people? I'll pretend you're a white person, and then you can pretend to be white. Why don't you eat what I eat? Why don't you drink what I drink? Why don't you think like I think? Why don't you feel like I feel?
I'm afraid with these feelings, there will be no progress and no change in racism. The fear of color will remain. The gap isn't being bridged here.
The cure for the pain is in the pain.
You don't want to believe that man can be so cruel to himself or his own kind.
From here, I can work with you.
What do you want us to get from the film?
I want us to get that that racism is still going on today, that we've got to stop to hear the anguish and the pain that goes with that, and that we'll survive. But it's not about guilt or blame. There's no founder of racism in this room today. But what we need to do is to acknowledge something has happened and that each of us individually has to do something about it with someone next to us, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and in our institutions.
Then he asked the audience to stand up.
I'd like you to choose somebody in this room that's very different looking than you. Maybe even somebody that you might be a little afraid of. Maybe even someone in this room that you might want to go up to but are scared to.
He had us talk about our lives and our thoughts on race, but just as important, he made us listen.
I'd like you to remember this, that what you do not say will be heard. If you decide to go just a little bit deeper, your partner will also follow you to that place, and you will have the beginning of a relationship with each other.
The problem is, for a black man, you can't just blend in. It's impossible.
You don't realize what's going on all around you, even though you don't feel as though you're a prejudiced person yourself. It brought a lot of things out, that make you realize maybe in some instances you really are.
I chose Carol as my partner because she's one of the people that if I was normally walking down the street would clasp their purse and avoid me. And that's one of the problems that I think are out there in society, is that we're viewed wrong. We're showed on television wrong. The images that have been portrayed by us have been all negative. And I wanted her to see that there are better people out there, and this was an opportunity for her to get that experience.
It's like for black males, it's every day. We're not making this up. It's every day. I have no chance, excuse my language, in hell to make it in this country.
What happens as a white woman, nobody tells me I'm better. They tell me I'm normal and there are people who are less. It takes so much work and so much digging in one's psyche to get it, that if I'm being taught some people are worse, oh my God, that means I'm being told that I'm better.
What it's going to require for us to have a multicultural society is to take the time to walk across a room, to go into another neighborhood, to invite another family into our home and to get to know theirs. We cannot keep working next to people for 20 or 30 years and never know anything personally about their lives. And today in this audience may be the beginning of that process. The truth is always there, but saying it out loud, that's the hard part.
She doesn't feel like an American. That bothers me.
Why is your primary identification more important than my primary identification?
I didn't say it was
I am
more
Dene.
important.
I am Navajo first. See?
When I talk about my pain, or Debbie talks about her pain, or Yvette talks about her pain, what's the purpose of saying discrimination comes in all forms? Why
Can you tell Karen, how do you react when you hear her say that?
It makes me feel like we're all discriminated against, and so what?
Get a grip.
It's a live and die for me sometimes. I have to put on my costume. When I go to work, I slick back my hair and it's straight to get the curls out.
I understand your feelings.
You are coming from your own pain and your own guilt.
Right.
Examine yourself. Don't put it on me.
I'm trying to figure out who I am, who you want me to be, who you see, how not to offend you, how to know how far to offend you before I lose my job.
If I leave it all outside and I get to walk in with the skeleton of my true, passionate, loving, caring, beautiful self, I get to leave all of that out the door. That's when I feel safe.
But I don't think we've ever really been able to hear how terrifying that can be and how much a person has to sacrifice to survive. I have no words.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know the full truth? Do you want to tell the full truth?
It's not okay anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anymore.
It never has.
You know,
it's like for me, denial's not an option anymore.
A lot of my friends used to make jokes and call me chink and stuff, and then kind of go, oh yeah, haha, you know.
And it's this whole thing about, you know, you are not American unless you're white.
Recently, I had a Caucasian man tell me that I don't see you as an Asian person. I just see you as a human being.
In front of us is this carload of white, very white, kids, white kids, younger than us. We're getting on the freeway, and they turn around to us, and they all start going like this. And we're all sitting in the car, and I could just feel everyone just freeze and get really rigid. And nothing was said, and nothing was said.
It's so ingrained, it's so degrading, it's so insulting. And I don't want my son to grow up like that. Perhaps this is our last chance. And maybe if we were to live it as if this were our last opportunity, we wouldn't waste a moment.
You open a magazine, every woman has to be beautiful, every woman has to be thin, every woman has to be blonde, every woman has to be this, what's that? For you? I'm sorry. It just upsets me that it's such a joke. It's uncomfortable for women to literally come up and face men about it.
I'm sure the distribution rate was like 95-5, with me getting 95% and the woman getting 5% because that's where my head was at.
You hold the power. We don't have access. We're blocked.
I said to a white male editor, I know I'm a twofer. I know that. I'm black and I'm a woman. And I know that's why you probably looked at me to begin with. And that might even be why you hired me.
You know, like so many women, I have been brutalized. Like so many women, I have not been physically safe. And I know that could happen again.
Zora Neale Hurston says, women are the mules of the world. That is how some people see us. And they see us like that so much that we begin to see ourselves like that.
I always get uptight when the cops are around. Took my license, he says, get in the car. He didn't say, get in the car, sir. Would you please go back to the car? Get in the car.
I was going to a party over in Kentucky, and I got lost. So I stopped at this bar, and I asked for directions, and this guy gave me directions. And I noticed in his hand he had a knife, and he had the knife out, and that knife was about this long.
What's different for me than for my father was I haven't fought as many cowboys as he has.
I want you to see me as a valuable person. I want you to see me as someone as valuable as yourself.
And why don't you, with your people, look for something within yourselves that can make you feel equal to us?
You chose to be that way. You chose it. Like I chose to be this criminal.
We were about 3 or 4 doors past the sports bar. I heard somebody say, "Faggots!" And I said, they're talking about us.
I don't know that I want to do this. When you said, I'm straight, don't worry about me, you put me at ease doing that.
A woman friend of mine told me about this guy that was really attracted to me, and that bugged me.
Part of me felt safe being in my sleeping bag.
I'm not comfortable with gay people. I don't agree with that way of life.
Men know who they are. Men are kind of predatory. Men rape. There's that fear. What is a man supposed to be like?
Big, powerful, doesn't feel any pain, plays through pain, is aggressive.
My straight parents birthed me. Where do you think gay people came from? Did they come from little evil caves that the devil created or something? How can you make us seem so hideous, so sinful, so immoral? We came out of you. We were raised by you, loved by you. We went to the same schools together. We went to church together. God made us gay.
Perhaps this is our last chance. And maybe if we were to live it as if this were our last opportunity, we wouldn't waste a moment.
It came to me in a flash that there was a God and that I was put on the earth to be an example of how strong people should be. And that God wouldn't help me because I had to do it on my own. Why else would I be there alone? The only way that I knew that I could be strong was by never allowing love in my life. And I just remember it. I remember determining that.
I ran away. I left home when I started running away when I was 12. And left for pretty much good at 14. I learned about class in a way that I don't think I would have learned otherwise, because we were pariah. We were poor. We were lower than poor. We were homeless. And I saw how people would look at us, and I saw that we were not people. It just gave me this awareness that will always be with me.
My first encounter with a black man, he was what they call short. He was going home in a couple of weeks. We made friends. He told me that he wrote his mother and his girlfriend. He told me that he wrote them and said, I'm not coming home. I'm not going to make it. I said, you crazy. Oh, man. Even if you believe that, how can you write them and tell them? And I was young and country, and I didn't know the procedure, but the youngest guy usually takes point, which means if you're going up the hill single file, the newest guy usually takes point. Well, Newsom, this guy who was going home 2 weeks, took point, and I didn't realize the significance of that. I've never gone here before.
You know, I didn't meet my mom till I was 14. I met my dad when I was 28. My grandmother found me, or found out that I was somewhere in New York City in the middle of January, and came and found me in a crib or something with a thin sheet by a half-open window. And she just wrapped me up and took me to live with her. She raised me. She saved my life. I call her Mom.
My father was an alcoholic. He was physically abusive to my mother. He beat my mother. So growing up in that kind of violence, you know, we were running into the night all the time and always feeling in chaos. I have built up all these defenses that have to do with being quick, verbally. This is so important to me to be here because I know what it's taken to get here, to speak, to have a voice.
I remember the first time that my dad went back to school. He was in graduate school. He was giving this presentation in a public forum. About 5 of the students got up, and they were European American. My dad was the only man of color. I realized for the first time in my life that my father had an accent. And I thought, wow, I hit my brothers. Did you know Dad has an accent? And then I thought, how brave he was. And I thought, how have you been living this life? Because I know what I go through, being this bicultural person and having one culture in our home life and going out to this other world and having to assimilate and be this other person.
My mother had me very late in life. I was illegitimate at a time when those things don't happen. My father lured me into this car with a puppy and told me he was my father, and I never smiled again. I said to my mother years later when I took her to see Star Wars, at that moment when he found out Darth Vader was his father, I just related. A lot of times I wasn't invited to people's houses. I was always outside because I was a pastor.
I was growing up in the 60s, and of course television, was showing all the race riots and all the cities burning, and so we're, watching on TV, and my father, he's going, damn it, those damn people, they're burning all the town. Great, he's almost saying, go ahead, burn that down, and so now where are you gonna live, And so I'm listening to him go on about that, and then of course the bizarre piece of it is like, he's doing that, and I'm watching dogs rip people up on, on TV.
I remember a cab pulls up. He's pulling me with him, and my mother's, trying to grab me too. So I'm, being pulled in 2 directions. I mean, I can imagine how my mother probably thought she was fighting for, her child, and then my father gets in this cab, and he's still yelling, and my mother's yelling, and he's gone. I buried it. Years went by, years. No phone call, no nothing. Who was this person that was in my life that claimed to love me,
How many diversity trainings are they going to put us through? I mean, we've had diversity, but at least we don't have to be in the office right now. That's the good news, 'cause anything to get out of the office.
About affirmative action?
Oh, brother. Buddhist thing up there. What is this, some sort of temple or a shrine?
My name is Lei Mun-Wah, and I'm here today to show you the film The Color of Fear. And I'm very fortunate today to have with me my co-facilitator and good friend, Linda Compton. And she's going to give you a chance to introduce herself so we can get to know each other.
All right, hold it. All right, hold
Good
on.
morning. Good morning.
Before we get started, I'd like a few answers from Linda Crowell, I believe. What was your name?
Linda Compton,
Okay,
sir.
Miss Compton. Could you tell us if you have any credentials? Anything about any experience that you might have? A license? Any type of certificate that shows that you actually have some experience in what you're doing? Huh?
Yes, sir. I have a master's degree in
No.
psychology.
Shouldn't we be able to get it? We should find out if this lady has a credential or a degree. I'd like to see it. I'd like to hear about it. I don't carry my degree around, but at least I'll be honest with you. I'm in broadcast journalism.
Sir, if you'll allow me, I'm happy to tell you.
Can you just tell
that
me
I have
straight out, do you have a
5
license?
years of
Do you have a
experience
license?
in doing
Excuse
diversity
me.
training. I
Answer
am a
me
diversity
straight.
consultant.
We should be able to find out whether or not she's got a license. Why is she evading the subject? Straightforward. Just tell me straight out.
Now that we've done our exercises in partners, is there anybody that would like to share what that experience was like for you? Yes, Leslie.
Well, I want to say this was a great dyad for me. You know, sitting here talking with Rufus, he was great. He changed my mind. You know, he's the best one of them I've ever met. He's not like all the others. He's the best one of them I ever talked to. Best one of them I ever met. It was just great. It was a good experience, and I know it made us, closer together. I'm going to ask him if he knows anybody to do my yard. And I've gotten to know him as a person now. So thank you. Thanks.